We're actually reviewing X-Men 27, Gerry Duggan, Phil Noto. We are in the Fall of X, and the Fall of X seems exciting. It seems like something that might get you or myself interested in this. You know, we're finally going to leave the Krakoan era. How are they going to do it? And I feel like we missed the mark here, Doc.
Yeah, I hated this fucking comic. I think you had a much higher expectation for what the Fall of X would bring than I did.
I had no expectations, to be honest, but hey, okay. You know, it could be fun because they're going to kill everything off that I hate. That could be interesting.
But really, are they? It doesn't seem like they are. It doesn't seem like at any point they were going to, because the whole goal here is for them to overcome the situation to bring back Krakoa. The only thing that they've given up at this point is actually being on segregationist orgy island.
I want to talk about this cover because this is the reason I had some expectations for this comic book. This really phenomenal Joshua Cassara comic book cover. It looks like Cyclops is being crucified. It's so dirty and violent. He looks like he's crying out in agony. He's got some power kind of steaming off of his eyes as he's been disabled at this point. He actually can't use his mutant power, and it looks like he's being tortured. Bad things are actually happening to him, and it feels like, hey, maybe there's actually stakes in the comic book. And I thought, wow, this comic book cover looks pretty metal, in my opinion. There's a chance that the story behind this is actually cool.
I think you like this cover a lot more than I did. I don't like Joshua Cassara's art. We've covered that a few times in the past. I don't think he's all that great. This was an attempt at trying to establish stakes in this book. The situation that it's depicting is interesting, but I don't even like the composition on it. So,
well, you and I disagree, but I thought the comic book cover portended good things. And then when I opened up and then I realized the new X-Men team is Miss Marvel, Rasputin, Talon, and Sync. And then I realized I made a mistake.
And Kitty. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Catherine Pride. She's not even Kate anymore. She's Catherine Pride. Fuck you, Gerry Duggan. We all should have known how bad this comic was going to be. And when it said Phil Noto as the interior artist, you knew it was going to be bland as shit just from that. That man is a charisma vacuum when it comes to superhero comic art.
I'll be honest with you, Doc. You are correct. Once you open up and you actually see the scene that the cover is depicting, it doesn't look nearly as metal. It doesn't look cool. In fact, it looks like Cyclops is wearing a gold diaper. I don't imagine that you could actually take this situation, which really should be so harrowing. It should almost be terrifying if you actually walked in on it. And when you see it, I was like, wow, he made it boring and not cool.
Phil Noto has exactly one camera angle, and it's straight on right at whatever he's looking at, and everything needs to look like the most bland version of whatever he is going to depict that is remotely conceivable. That is Phil Noto's art. He fucking sucks, and anyone that puts him on a comic book deserves to be fired at this point.
Once I got to this page, because it's only about 5 pages into the comic book, where you finally see Shadowcat walking in on Cyclops, and you're just like, wah, wah. Yeah. Any type of anticipation or excitement I had based on the cover just escaped me, and I was like, oh, it's fucking Gerry Duggan X-Men comics. It's not supposed to look cool.
On the page before that, you had the Juggernaut chained up, and he's just sitting there like a lump on a fucking log.
Well, you mentioned the Juggernaut. Let's get to this point, because she's there for what seems like a pretty interesting mission. Like, there's some potential to the story, Doc. All the X-Men have been rounded up. They're captured by Orcus, and they've sent Shadowcat in to do a head count, and she's phasing through walls and discovering the horrors, what they're going through. My goodness, what a great concept for a comic book. The amount of things that you could put in there to really draw you in and build up the stakes of everything that's going on, the amount of torture and the harrowing events that the X-Men are experiencing right now are just absolutely, mind-boggling what you could do with this. But Juggernaut's sitting there, like you mentioned, he's smiling, just having a conversation like nothing happened. Shadowcat actually removes his neck thing so he can leave, but then she tells him, but don't leave until tomorrow. Otherwise, they're going to suspect that something's happening. And I'm going, do they not feed this fucker? They're not going to notice that the enormous platinum fucking collar is not on his neck anymore? There's no cameras in this fucking prison?
Apparently not. What, does Orcus suddenly give a shit about their privacy and their ability to poop without being on video camera? No, it's Orcus. You're supposed to establish them as completely diabolical, terrible people.
Yeah, and then there's like this idea. She's like, it doesn't matter if you're an X-Men or not. All mutants are X-Men now because we're bound by this, the injustice that Orcus is perpetrating on us. And she says it like to fucking Juggernaut. She's like,
yeah, the one guy that's not even a fucking mutant. And the fact is, when you get to the end of this comic, her big giant plan about him hanging out for an extra day so that he could break out, we find out that right at the end, his breakout failed. They don't even bother to show it on panel. Nimrod beat his ass and threw him back into the cell. The most exciting description of a scene, Juggernaut versus Nimrod, they don't even bother to fucking show us.
And this is the most exciting thing probably to happen to X-Men, at least 2 years since Gerry Duggan's been on it. All the X-Men have been round up and they've been imprisoned. They're being tortured and all these things are happening to them. Shadowcat is discovering all the atrocities that she's doing this head count. And you could really build up the stakes and do something great. But that's not even what this fucking comic book is about, Doc. It's a side quest. Yeah. Because you got the new X-Men, Catherine Pryde, Rasputin, Synch, Miss Marvel, and Talon, who I believe is actually X-23. They need to go on a road trip because they need to talk to the Fantastic Four, who off the grid, they gave up Twitter because they were mad at something. They need to discover how Reed Richards was actually camouflaging Franklin Richards' X gene. That's the big purpose of the meeting. But the big problem is they brought a retard along with them. Her name is Rasputin, and she doesn't know how to communicate with people. And the opening scene, when you see her interact with the Fantastic Four, she just knocks the shit out of Ben Grimm. I fucking hated it. She does it 3 times.
This broad's a fucking moron. Why would nobody decide, hey, why don't you fucking wait here? Because you're the only bitch here that doesn't even know these people. Yep, she's just the one that wanders off acting like a fucking Terminator. And everybody's like, oh, no. And they try to do it like a bit throughout this whole thing, where she keeps single-handedly taking out members of the Fantastic Four. First, she takes out Ben. Then she takes out the Human Torch. Then she just walks out of Invisible Woman's force field. And then she takes out Ben again. And then she decides that she likes Sue Storm.
Of course she does. She's another female character.
Because,
women scissoring, not talking.
Exactly. Why aren't they making out yet?
And the idea behind all of this, because Gerry Duggan is a fucking moron, is that she shows up, she knocks the shit out of Ben Grimm, she depowers Johnny Storm, she phases through Sue's invisible shield, she knocks out Ben Grimm again, and then Reed Richards is like, yeah, put on your Cerebro and enter my mind. I have no problems with that. You seem like such a nice person.
This is what happens when you have smart people written by actual fucking like Gerry Duggan.
Yeah, it's absolutely stupid. And then she goes into his mind because they need to retrieve whatever Reed Richards did to mask Franklin Richards, because they're gonna mask all the mutants so Orcus can't find them and obviously create their army that way.
But the Dan Slott run said that Franklin Richards used his power to create himself an X gene. He was never a mutant. I don't know why they're even doing this story now, because Slott's Fantastic Four said that he doesn't even have an X gene. It's an artificially created one.
Well, it turns out when she goes into his mind, it's just an enormous cavern. Yeah. And that information is unretrievable.
But then, because Miss Marvel is perfect and always is going to, it needs to be the greatest X-Man already and the smartest person there, she's the one that somehow manages to spark Reed Richards' memory, because she talks about how the Terrigen mists mask her X gene. Reed goes, that's it, and then gets a high five.
The worst panel in comic book history, Doc.
It really is. They just high five. You know what? It's as bad as whenever they did Tony Stark and somebody else. They high fived and called themselves science bros. This is actually worse. The absolutely perfect, everybody loves her, America's sweetheart, Miss Marvel, needs to be the one that comes up with the solution. She somehow gets smarter than Reed.
You know what the worst part about this comic book, Doc? Everything that I've just described to you could have been done with a sentence within the comic book. They're like, what we need to do is discover how Reed Richards masked Franklin Richards' X gene, and then Miss Marvel says, well, I called him and he's figuring it out. He'll get back to us.
Yeah. And then they could have told this story literally anywhere else or never. I don't care.
They could have actually done the story that was interesting that opened the book, even though the art was bad. It's just people talking. That's the problem. The only time there's any action is when Reed high fives Miss Marvel or when Rasputin is knocking the absolute shit out of Ben Grimm. Those are the only action scenes within the fucking comic book. You mentioned that apparently there was a fight scene between Nimrod and Juggernaut, which sounds like, I don't know if it's a dream match, but it's certainly up there. You don't even see it.
Because remember, actual fucking action is an inconvenience to whatever bullshit slice of life, talking over food, drinking coffee, blabbering about your emotions bullshit that these people actually want to write. And they wonder why fucking superhero comics are selling in basically single digits.
All right, Doc. So we are in Fall of X. We are coming down to the end game with this. You know, Tom Brevoort's going to be taking over in early 2024. Did X-Men 27 sell you on the concept? Are you coming back full time to see how this all unfolds?
These motherfuckers couldn't pay me to read this bullshit. I mean, the only reason I read it is because you ask, and I only read it whenever you ask. If you were to assign this to me for a monthly, I'd veto it. I'd say, fuck that, not bothering. No, you cannot pay me to read X-Men.
The only reason this happened was I was reading all my comic books to get ready for my Hot or Not podcast with Jim on Patreon. And I saw the cover and I was like, there's a chance this is cool. And I went and read it and I was like, this is so bad. I should torture Doc with it.
Yeah, I assumed that was probably about the case. No, this comic was abysmal.
I would give the art like a 0.5 out of the scale of, 2.5 is the total you can get for art on a 5-point scale. And I would give it like a 0.5 and the story like a 1. So I guess it's like a 1.5 out of 5. I think it was like really, really, really bad. Like you're below failing levels at this point. You're like, we're going to have to send this guy back a grade because he's too stupid to do what he's doing.
I don't give Phil Noto art, especially in superhero comics, any points. I would prefer fucking stick figures over your baby-legged, straight angle, bland watercolor. No, it's not even watercolor. It's colored pencil. It looks like a fucking kindergartner drew this. I would prefer the stick figures of an actual kindergartner over this bullshit art that's masquerades as superhero art. You fucking suck. Get out of this industry.
I will say this. I have a 4-year-old, Doc. If I said, I want you to draw a superhero with his eyes sewn shut and it's supposed to scare you, he would have come up with a better image than Phil Noto did on the interiors here. Yes. It would have been scarier. It would have been more impactful.
I award you 0 points, Phil Noto, and may God have mercy on your soul. And then for Gerry Duggan's story, I give it 1.
There you go.
No, you know what? I give it a 0.5 star too. Because the premise is okay that he drops a page in, makes the story as bland and time wasting as humanly possible, and they don't give a shit if it doesn't sell. So they're going to try to take as long as they can and show as least interesting things as humanly possible while giving us fucking books. Cancel X-Men. It's a better use of money. Those trees would be better staying up there and creating oxygen than they are being published into fucking comic books.
Me personally, I would say that Gerry Duggan's time on X-Men, his 27 issues on a premier A-level book, it's been an outright failure basically on every level, especially creatively. And Doc and I talked about why the first 12 issues of Gerry Duggan's X-Men was so bad and why it failed right there. And no one gives a shit about this team anymore. There's also a link in the video description.